Cool. We're live. We're live again. Welcome. Welcome back. If you are not a new viewer, if you are a new viewer, subscriber, audience member, welcome to my channel. My name is Ashley Gemini. I am, in fact, a Gemini, and I genuinely receive joy from reading feminist literature in my lingerie. I'm also a yoga teacher. There's no editing available for the time being. If you're curious about why, please check out my last video titled Channel Updates, etc., etc. But I am so excited to get back into this book. This book changed my life. I don't know how to flip the screen, so if you can't read backwards, no shade. It takes practice. Everything takes practice, including YouTubing. But this is The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by the one, the only, the iconic Bell Hooks. Love her, cherish her. It was written in 2004. I don't need to double check that. It was written in 2004. So there will be times when I edit some of the language to be more gender inclusive. She does not hold space for trans and non-binary identities, which I have all the time and all the space for. So where applicable, I will include that in her language. Also, she is known for coining the term imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. And every time I see that in here, I also add ableist into it because ableism is a part of the same system. Every single system of oppression is kind of the same system. I almost said they're interrelated, but they're literally the same system. And a lot of our interpersonal problems, maybe all of our interpersonal problems, can be traced back to patriarchy at some point. Specifically, if you want to get detailed, it's the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist, ableist patriarchy. Those are all just adjectives to describe what we refer to in shorthand as patriarchy. Not sorry if that word triggers you. I attempted to be friends with a man once, and one of many reasons why we're not friends anymore is that he's triggered by the word triggered. And the reason for that is because patriarchy, specifically psychological patriarchy, that's the internalized belief system that men cannot be vulnerable. Men cannot be scared. They cannot be hurt. They cannot be, I don't know. They're not allowed to have the full range of human emotions. And that is a terrifying way to live, you know? And as a post second wave feminist woman, since they let us out of the kitchen, I'm sure I referenced that in one of my other videos, but since being allowed to participate in the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist, ableist patriarchy, as women, we also have had our emotional expression censored more and more as time goes on. But we still have it, at least in this arena, in the arena of emotional expression, we women have an enormous privilege in that it's socially acceptable for us as women to meet together and talk about our feelings, or to get on the internet and talk about our feelings. And the purpose of me doing this series, you can check out my intro video for a longer edited explanation, but just off the top of my head, I want a world where everyone feels free. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery, okay? That's the first step, truly, and sometimes it's the hardest step. So let's make a community out of this. Feel free to comment. Thank you, Eric, for commenting on my last video. I want this to be a safe space for men. Yeah, don't run away when people say safe space. Like, maybe it's okay to need safety and comfort. Maybe not, you know? Like, if you disagree, disagree with me in the comments. I want this to be a dialogue. Oh wow. If you've seen my chapter 1 video, you'll know I'm not used to wearing hair, and sometimes it gets caught in your lip gloss, so there you go. Oh, speaking of makeup, I wanted to finish the thought that I started in my channel update video, where I was talking about how I've seen it from 2 different sources, but I think they were citing the same study, how the amount of makeup men find most attractive is just enough makeup to look like you're not wearing any. What? That's the patriarchy, right? Here I am on chapter 2, understanding patriarchy. On Patriarchy Day, we wear pink. And also, I'm wearing not my natural hair, because white supremacy is an integral part of the patriarchy, and inauthenticity is an integral part of the patriarchy. So by being transparent about the fact that, yes, I am wearing makeup, if you want to see me do some of it, it's pretty funny. Like, I really can't. I can tell that I'm wearing makeup, but I'm really curious to see if any of the boys or men out there think that this is just how women look. Because the study says that. So they gave men pictures of a woman wearing zero makeup, just a little bit, and like a full beat, like a lot of makeup. And they want the one in the middle because they're so used to seeing women wear makeup that when you're not wearing it, they're like, what's wrong with her face? And it's like, we're human. We have blood underneath our skin. Everybody has circles underneath their eyes. You're just not used to seeing it in women because patriarchy. And when you're wearing too much makeup, they're like, oh, she's trying to trick me. That's not what she really looks like. Why would I sleep with her if I don't know who I'm going to wake up next to in the morning? And it's like, I'm not going to say that women only wear makeup to please men, because that's not the truth. Adorning your body is perfectly natural. And men, I'm here to tell you, as somebody who doesn't usually wear makeup, when I put concealer on, I feel like I'm airbrushed on the cover of something, you know. I am camera ready, at least by my standards. So, and also based on my last comment, I wanted to apologize if I offended anybody with fair skin, because I do believe that suffer. We live with hyperpigmentation, so instead of redness, you'll get like brown spots where maybe you've popped a zit in the last couple of weeks and it's just living on your face. um, and like darkness under the eyes, darkness around the mouth. So everybody's different. Everybody's got their own journey. Biodiversity, right? There's by reading this book, by challenging my own internalized hierarchical frameworks and living that and speaking that, I hope to assist in creating a world where people are okay with difference, you know, where we don't need to rank everyone and everything as what's better and what's worse, because nobody's ever going to be good enough. Spoiler alert, nobody's ever going to be good enough. If we keep ranking each other. Whereas if we behave the way that nature behaves, which is biodiversity for the win, there's room for everyone, truly. And just thinking about it makes me relax so much. I did change the camera angle so that you could see my skateboard in the back, because learning how to skateboard is the coolest thing I've ever done. But now it's cutting off my wig heads at the top, and I think I just like the framing of this better. Yeah, I like the framing better. And you can still see my skateboard. Perfect. Let's get into it. This is such a good book, y'all. Please pick up your own copy. Um, Girl, don't be mad if I repeat myself because some of this bears repeating. Or be mad. You're entitled to your feelings. I will do my best to let y'all know when it's me speaking versus when I'm reading, but for the most part, I'm just going to try to read through this because it's already been 10 minutes. I'm a rambler, okay? This challenge of filming live is also an opportunity to grow into a more concise speaker, so I'm here for it. We love growth and lubrication. I guess pun intended. I don't know. I was really referring to the water, but look. No glove, no love, no lube, no love. Just saying. Chapter 2, Understanding Patriarchy. Bell Hooks be coming with the one-liners, y'all. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Chapter 2, Understanding Patriarchy. Patriarchy is the single most life-threatening social disease assaulting the male body and spirit in our nation. It's a one-liner, but I want to say it again. Patriarchy is the single most life-threatening social disease assaulting the male body and spirit in our nation. Yet most men do not use the word patriarchy in everyday life. Most men never think about patriarchy, what it means, how it is created and sustained. Many men in our nation would not be able to spell the word or pronounce it correctly. This is me talking. That was definitely a read. Her words, not mine, y'all. I'm not going to comment on the American education system, but I do believe that most men would be able to spell patriarchy. I agree that most men never think about it, but I disagree that, oh, she said many. She didn't say most. She said many men in our nation would not be able to spell the word or pronounce it correctly. Okay, she's right. Never mind. I'm trying to be nice, but facts are facts. Moving on, back to Belle. The word patriarchy is just not a part of their normal everyday thought or speech. Men who have heard and know the word, usually associated with women's liberation, with feminism, and therefore dismiss it as irrelevant to their own experiences. I have been standing at podiums talking about patriarchy for more than 30 years. It is a word I use daily, and men who hear me use it often ask me what I mean by it. Nothing discounts the old anti-feminist projection of men as all-powerful more than their basic ignorance of a major facet of the political system that shapes and informs male identity and sense of self from birth until death. I often use the phrase imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, ableist, patriarchy to describe the interlocking political systems that are the foundation of our nation's politics. Side note, not just our nation, okay? We are the sons and daughters of Great Britain, and I mean, there's plenty of people talking about Great Britain by now, but back to bell hooks. Of these systems, the one that we all learn the most about growing up is the system of patriarchy, even if we never know the word. Because patriarchal gender roles are assigned to us as children, and we are given continual guidance about the ways we can best fulfill these roles. Patriarchy is a political, social system that insists that males are inherently dominating, superior to everything and everyone deemed weak, especially females, and endowed with the right to dominate and rule over the weak and to maintain that dominance through various forms of psychological terrorism and violence. I said I wasn't going to do a lot of side notes, but I'm going to reread that sentence, and if you hadn't been thinking about it this way already, think about imperialism and capitalism and ableism and racism instead of the word patriarchy. Watch. Patriarchy is a political social system, or capitalism, or imperialism, etc. They are all a political social system that insists that males are inherently dominating, superior to everything and everyone deemed weak, especially females, and endowed with the right to dominate and rule over the weak, and to maintain that dominance through various forms of psychological terrorism and violence. Just saying. Back to the book. When my older brother and I were born with a year separating us in age, patriarchy determined how we would each be regarded by our parents. Both our parents believed in patriarchy. They had been taught patriarchal thinking through religion. At church, they had learned that God created man to rule the world and everything in it, and that it was the work of women to help men perform these tasks, to obey, and to always assume a subordinate role in relation to a powerful man. They were taught that God was male. These teachings were reinforced in every institution they encountered: schools, courthouses, clubs, sports arenas, as well as churches. Embracing patriarchal thinking, like everyone else around them, they taught it to their children because it seemed like a natural way to organize life. As their daughter, I was taught that it was my role to serve, to be weak, to be free from the burden of thinking, to caretake and nurture others. My brother was taught that it was his role to be served, to provide, to be strong, to think, strategize, and plan, and to refuse to caretake or nurture others. You know, I'm going to pause again and reiterate again that the parallels between racism and sexism are so close together that they're basically the same line. Every time I say male, you can substitute whiteness, and every time I say female, you can substitute blackness, and most of the time they fit. Just saying. Maybe you've never thought of it that way before, but try it. Try it. If you think about it and still disagree, please comment below. I'd love to talk about it. You know, why not? Why not? What do we lose by thinking? What do we lose by discussing? Right? Just as an experiment. If you struggle with believing in racism, try like use sexism as your gateway drug. But anyway, yeah. Look, I was taught, back to the book. I was taught that it was not proper for a female to be violent, that it was unnatural. My brother was taught that his value would be determined by his will to do violence, albeit in appropriate settings. He was taught that for a boy, enjoying violence was a good thing, albeit in appropriate settings. He was taught that a boy should not express feelings. I was taught that girls could and should express feelings, or at least some of them. Okay, pausing again. This is why I usually edit my videos, you guys. I still stand by what I said. I didn't say it was a one-to-one correlation. I just said there were lots of parallels because it's not a one-to-one correlation, especially since you have people of all genders in both races, in all races. Hi. Nothing is black and white. Nothing is black and white. That's an end of lesson. We've all learned what we came to learn. This is me trying not to get distracted. All right. I'm going to go back. So the prose is really good, and one of the reasons why I don't want to interrupt too much is to not interrupt the flow of her writing. All right, back to just gender. Let's leave race out of it for now. But in the back of your mind, just look for those parallels. As their daughter, I was taught that it was my role to serve, to be weak, to be free from the burden of thinking, to caretake and nurture others. My brother was taught that it was his role to be served, to provide, to be strong, to think, strategize, and plan, and to refuse to caretake or nurture others. I was taught that it was not proper for a female to be violent, that it was unnatural. My brother was taught that his value would be determined by his will to do violence, albeit in appropriate settings. He was taught that for a boy, enjoying violence was a good thing, albeit in appropriate settings, like football, I don't know, sports, war. I wasn't raised a man, so I don't know. He was taught that a boy should not express feelings. I was taught that girls could and should express feelings, or at least some of them. When I responded with rage at being denied a toy, I was taught as a girl in a patriarchal household that rage was not an appropriate feminine feeling, that it should be not only not be expressed. Okay, that was a typo. Okay. That it should not only not be expressed, but be eradicated. When my brother responded with rage at being denied a toy, he was taught as a boy in patriarchal household that his ability to express rage was good, but that he had to learn the best setting to unleash his hostility, like sports ball. I don't know. It was not good for him to use his rage to oppose the wishes of his parents. But later, when he grew up, he was taught that rage was permitted, and that allowing rage to provoke him to violence would help him protect home and nation. We lived in farm country, isolated from other people. Our sense of gender roles was learned from our parents, from the way we saw them behave. My brother and I remember our confusion about gender. In reality, I was stronger and more violent than my brother, which we learned quickly was bad. And he was a gentle, peaceful boy, which we learned was really bad. Although we were often confused, we knew one fact for certain. We could not be and act the way we wanted to, doing what we felt like. It was clear to us that our behavior had to follow a predetermined, gendered script. We both learned the word patriarchy in our adult life when we learned that the script that had determined what we should be, the identities we should make, was based on patriarchal values and beliefs about gender. I was always more interested in challenging patriarchy than my brother was because it was the system that was always leaving me out of things that I wanted to be a part of. In our family life of the 50s, marbles were a boys' game. Side note, I used to play with marbles too as like a little bitty girl. I guess my uncles used to have marbles and they really are pretty, but this is Belle's perspective now. And I didn't have anybody to play with. I'm an only child if you didn't know. So back to Belle. My brother had inherited his marbles from men in the family. He had a tin box to keep them in, all shapes, all sizes and shapes, marvelously colored. They were to my eye the most beautiful objects. We played together with them, often with me aggressively clinging to the marble I liked best, refusing to share. When Dad was at work, our stay-at-home mom was quite content to see us playing marbles together. Yet Dad, looking at our play from a patriarchal perspective, was disturbed by what he saw. His daughter, aggressive and competitive, was a better player than his son. His son was passive. The boy did not really seem to care who won and was willing to give over marbles on demand. Girl, that's relatable content. I'm that guy. I'm so not competitive. I'm like, oh, you want to win? Please do. Please do. Back to Belle. His son was passive. The boy did not really seem to care who won and was willing to give over marbles on demand. Dad decided that this play had to end, that both my brother and I needed to learn a lesson about appropriate gender roles. Content warning for domestic violence. Yeah, maybe I'll put that in the description. One evening, my brother was given permission by Dad to bring out the tin of marbles. I announced my desire to play and was told by my brother that, quote, girls did not play with marbles, end quote, that it was a boys' game. This made no sense to my 4 or 5-year-old mind, and I insisted on my right to play by picking up marbles and shooting them. Dad intervened to tell me to stop. I did not listen. His voice grew louder and louder. Then suddenly he snatched me up, broke a board from our screen door, and began to beat me with it, telling me, "You're just a little girl. When I tell you to do something, I mean for you to do it." He beat me and he beat me, wanting me to acknowledge that I understood what I had done. His rage, his violence captured everyone's attention. Our family sat spellbound, wrapped before the pornography of patriarchal violence. After this beating, I was banished, forced to stay alone in the dark. Mama came into the bedroom to soothe the pain, telling me in her soft southern voice, "I tried to warn you. You need to accept that you are just a little girl and girls can't do what boys do." In service to patriarchy, her task was to reinforce that Dad had done the right thing by putting me in my place, by restoring the natural social order. She didn't put the natural social order in quotation marks. I just can't say it with a straight face. Okay, back to the book. I remember this traumatic event so well because it was a story told again and again within our family. No one cared that the constant retelling might trigger post-traumatic stress. The retelling was necessary to reinforce both the message and the remembered state of absolute powerlessness. The recollection of this brutal whipping of a little girl daughter by a big, strong man served as more than just a reminder to me of my gendered place. It was a reminder to everyone watching/remembering, to all my siblings, male and female, and to our grown woman mother, that our patriarchal father was the ruler in our household. We were to remember that if we did not obey his rules, we would be punished, punished even unto death. This is the way we were experientially schooled in the art of patriarchy. I don't know if I make the same face every time this happens, but sometimes it's a new paragraph. And Bell Hooks and her one-liners, y'all. It hits deep. It hits deep. Girl, look. Listen. Like after that whole dramatic story, Bell Hooks on. It's hard to say. There is nothing unique or even exceptional about this experience. There is nothing unique or even exceptional about this experience. This is just the world we live in. There's nothing unique or exceptional about her experience. I'm going to move on. Listen to the voices of wounded grown children raised in patriarchal homes, and you will hear different versions of the same underlying theme: the use of violence to reinforce our indoctrination and acceptance of patriarchy. This book title gets me every time. In How Can I Get Through to You? Family therapist Terrence Real tells how his sons were initiated into patriarchal thinking even as their parents worked to create a loving home in which anti-patriarchal values prevailed. He tells of how his young son, Alexander, enjoyed dressing as Barbie until boys playing with his older brother witnessed his Barbie persona and let him know by their gaze and their shocked, disapproving silence that his behavior was unacceptable. This is a block quote from Terrence Real. How can I get through to you? Without a shred of malevolence, the stare my son received transmitted a message. You are not to do this. And the medium that message was broadcast in was a potent emotion, shame. Shame. I couldn't resist. If the bell hadn't been right there, I would have ignored that opportunity for a Game of Thrones reference, but I had to do it. Shame. Sorry, Terrence Real goes on. This is heavy stuff, comedy, right? Laughter, medicine, sugar helps the medicine go down. Anyway. Yeah, that's the emotion with which we police a lot of behaviors, but especially boys trying to do anything considered not masculine. Terrence Real goes on. At 3, Alexander was learning the rules. A 10-second wordless transaction was powerful enough to dissuade my son from that instant forward from what had been a favorite activity. I call such moments of induction the normal traumatization of boys, end quote. This is back to Bell. To indoctrinate boys into the rules of patriarchy, we force them to feel pain and to deny their feelings. Ow. Yeah. That's flashing back to when my grandmother, I have only had maybe 3 spankings my whole childhood, but my cousins got a lot more. And the phrase, like, I'll give you something to cry about, when you're in pain already, it's like, I just am not allowed to express feelings, huh? And that's how all boys are indoctrinated. It's really sad. Um, if you want me to talk off book about the Black female experience of also not being allowed to express our emotions, see, you know what? I'm just go to Khadijah and Bo's whole channel. She's got so many great videos. But I'm just gonna move on. Staying in my lane. Live television. Okay. To indoctrinate boys into the rules of patriarchy, we force them to feel pain and to deny their feelings. My stories took place in the 50s. Stories Real tells are recent. They all underscore the tyranny of patriarchal thinking, the power of patriarchal culture to hold us captive. Real is one of the most enlightened thinkers on the subject of patriarchal masculinity in our nation, and yet he lets readers know that he is not able to keep his boys out of patriarchy's reach. They suffer its assaults, as do all boys and girls, to a greater or lesser degree. No doubt, by creating a loving home that is not patriarchal, Real at least offers his boys a choice. They can choose to be themselves, or they can choose conformity with patriarchal roles. Real uses the phrase psychological patriarchy to describe the patriarchal thinking common to females and males. Despite the contemporary visionary feminist thinking that makes clear that a patriarchal thinker need not be male, most folks continue to see men as the problem of patriarchy. This is simply not the case. Women can be as wedded to patriarchal thinking and action as men. See also my grandmother. Moving back to the book, psychotherapist John Bradshaw's clear-sighted definition of patriarchy in Creating Love is a useful one. Quote, the dictionary defines patriarchy as social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or family in both domestic and religious functions. Patriarchy is characterized by male domination and power. He states further that patriarchal rules still govern most of the world's religious, school systems, and family systems, end quote. Describing the most damaging of these rules, Bradshaw lists, okay, still talking about John Bradshaw, still in the book Creating Love. Blind obedience, the foundation upon which patriarchy stands. Blind obedience, the repression of all emotions except fear, the destruction of individual willpower, and the repression of thinking whenever it departs from the authority figure's way of thinking. End quote. Those are just the four most damaging rules. Girl, I'm gonna say that again. Describing the most damaging of these rules, Bradshaw lists blind obedience, the foundation upon which patriarchy stands, specifically, or more detailed, imperialist, capitalist, ableist, white supremacist patriarchy. Same system upheld by the most damaging of many rules are blind obedience, the destruction of individual willpower, repression of all emotions except fear, and the repression of thinking whenever it departs from the authority figure's way of thinking. Mm. Testify, John. John the Revelator. That wasn't in the book. That's the end of the quote. Back to Bell. Patriarchal thinking shapes the values of our culture. We are socialized into this system, females as well as males. And intersex people. Look. Look, there's more than two sexes, and there's way more than two genders. I'm just going to put that out there. I might interrupt and like edit it again and again and again because I think it's really important. But no shade to bell hooks. It was 2004. We were not having the same conversations that we are having today. But what if you have Turner syndrome? What if you have Klinefelter syndrome? What if you were born with both down there and like two X's and a Y chromosome? These people exist. They're a small portion of the population, but they're out here. We are all socialized into the system. Females, males, and intersex people. Okay, back to the book. Most of us learned patriarchal attitudes in our family of origin, and they were usually taught to us by our mothers. These attitudes were reinforced in schools and religious institutions. The contemporary presence of female-headed households has led many people to assume that children in these households are not learning patriarchal values because no male is present. Excuse me. They assume that men are the sole teachers of patriarchal thinking. Yet many female-headed households endorse and promote patriarchal thinking with far greater passion than two-parent households. Because they do not have an experiential reality to challenge false fantasies of gender roles, women in such households are far more likely to idealize the patriarchal male role and patriarchal men than are women who live with patriarchal men every day. We need to highlight the role women play in perpetuating and sustaining patriarchy as a system women and men, and others, support equally, even if men receive more rewards from that system. Dismantling and changing patriarchal culture is work that men and women and others must do together. Clearly, we cannot dismantle a system as long as we engage in collective denial about its impact on our lives. What is it that they say? The first step is recognizing that you have a problem. If you're in denial that the system even exists, we can't go nowhere. You're just, I mean, look, your body, your choice, but anyway, you get to choose what you do with your time. If you're not interested, if you just like don't believe in it, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm just here to give people options. Because if you've never thought about it, how would you know? People aren't talking about patriarchy. That's why I'm doing this, is because I want more people to talk about it. Debate me. Shit. Keep listening. You might change your mind by the end of the episode. As I'm such a Khadijah Mbow stan, I'm like, she ends every video with, remember, you can always change your mind because you can. Another side note, and then I'll get back to the book, I swear, is Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm a Gemini, but I also have a Virgo rising and a Virgo moon, which means that I love being right so much. I love being right so much that if you come at me with more evidence, I will change my mind because I want to stay right. I don't want to be out here telling people the wrong thing. I also don't want to be out here looking foolish to have somebody with more evidence than me look at me saying, like, oh, she's wrong, which is fine because it's being more and more accepted that it's okay to be wrong. Um, Maybe we'll talk about perfectionism and patriarchy in another video, but yeah, I enjoy being right so much that I'm willing to change my mind. So if you think I'm wrong, convince me, please. I'm serious. Um, but if you like being right, keep listening. Maybe you'll change your mind too. But as Bell Hooks says, clearly we cannot dismantle the system as long as we engage in collective denial about its impact on our lives. Patriarchy requires male dominance by any means necessary. Hence, it supports, promotes, and condones sexist violence. Just saying. We hear the most about. She didn't write just saying. I'm sure y'all are intelligent enough to figure out when it's just my little quips, but. We hear the most about sexist violence in public discourse about rape and abuse by domestic partners. But the most common forms of patriarchal violence are those that take place in the home between patriarchal parents and children. The point of such violence is usually to reinforce a dominator model, in which the authority figure is deemed ruler over those without power and given the right to maintain that rule through practices of subjugation, subordination, and submission. Keeping males and females and others from telling the truth about what happens to them in families is one way patriarchal culture is maintained. A great majority of individuals enforce an unspoken rule in the culture as a whole that demands we keep the secrets of patriarchy, thereby protecting the rule of the father. This rule of silence is upheld when the culture refuses everyone easy access even to the word patriarchy. Most children do not learn what to call this system of institutionalized gender roles, so rarely do we name it in everyday speech. This silence promotes denial. And how can we organize to challenge and change a system that cannot be named? So if you don't like the word patriarchy, come up with another word. We still need to dismantle the system. Please. Brainstorm in the comments. Back to the book. It is no accident that feminists began to use the word patriarchy to replace the more commonly used male chauvinism and sexism. Wow. Remember chauvinism? Anyone? Are all y'all too young to remember chauvinism? Sorry, I'm not sorry. I'm just excited about the book, so I just keep talking. It is no accident that feminists began to use the word patriarchy to replace the more commonly used male chauvinism and sexism. These courageous voices wanted men and women to become more aware of the way patriarchy affects us all. In popular culture, the word itself was hardly used during the heyday of contemporary feminism. Anti-male activists were no more eager than their sexist male counterparts to emphasize the system of patriarchy and the way it works. For to do so would have automatically exposed the notion that men were all-powerful and women powerless, that all men were oppressive and women always and only victims. By placing the blame for the perpetuation of sexism solely on men, these women could maintain their own allegiance to patriarchy, their own lust for power. They masked their longing to be dominators by taking on the mantle of victimhood. Nowadays, we call those women girl bosses, aka white feminists. Excuse me, did I did I just speak truth to power? What? Like many visionary radical feminists, see, there's a difference between inclusive feminism and white feminism. White feminism is literally that second wave mindset where it's like, we just want the same power that men got. And visionary radical feminism is AKA intersectional feminism, is about redistributing the power entirely. Like, why do we even have hierarchies? If you continue to have a hierarchy, you continue to have oppression. I thought we wanted to end oppression, not just become oppressors. At least I do. Some people really do just want to become oppressors, and there's a lane for that. This ain't it. There is a lane for that. I promise. It's called white feminism. Y'all have at it. We'll be over here trying to free everybody while y'all keep fighting to be at the top of a system that is destroying our planet as well as billions of people's lives. If that sits all right with your soul, your body, your choice, you know? I just want everybody to feel safe. And yeah, you can't feel safe if you're being involuntarily, non-consensually dominated by anybody, whether they're a man, a woman, or another. Seriously, like, stop fighting for rights just so that you can dominate other people. Or keep doing it. I'm not here to tell other people what to do. I'm just saying that there's alternatives. It's not a zero-sum game. There are alternatives. Back to Belle. Like many visionary radical feminists, I challenged the misguided notion put forward by women who were simply fed up with the male exploitation and oppression that men were the enemy. As early as 1984, I included a chapter with the title Men, Comrades in Struggle in my book, Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, urging advocates of feminist politics to challenge any rhetoric which placed the sole blame for perpetuating patriarchy and male domination onto men. I agree wholeheartedly, Bell Hooks. Go on, sis. So this is a block quote from the essay Men, Comrades, and Struggles. Men, Comrades in Struggle, from her book Feminist Theory, from Margin to Center. Separatist ideology encourages women to ignore the negative impact of sexism on male personhood. Ooh. It stresses polarization between the sexes. According to Joy Justice, separatists believe that there are two basic perspectives on the issue of naming the victims of sexism. Quote, there is the perspective that men oppress women, and there is the perspective that people are people, and we are all hurt by rigid gender roles. She said sex roles. Sorry, Joy. End quote. Both perspectives accurately describe our predicament. Men do oppress women. People are hurt by rigid sexist role patterns. These two realities coexist. Not two thoughts at once. Two thoughts at once. Male oppression of women cannot be excused by the recognition that there are ways men are hurt by rigid sexist roles. Feminist activists should acknowledge that hurt and work to change it. It exists. It does not erase or lessen male responsibility for supporting and perpetuating their power under patriarchy to exploit and oppress women in a manner far more grievous than the serious psychological stress. Acknowledge that hurt and work to change it. It exists. It does not erase or lessen male responsibility for supporting and perpetuating their power under patriarchy to exploit and oppress women in a manner far more grievous than the serious psychological stress and emotional pain caused by male conformity to rigid sexist role patterns. End quote. Throughout this essay, I stressed that feminist advocates collude in the pain of men wounded by patriarchy when they falsely represent men as always and only powerful, as always and only gaining privileges from their blind obedience to patriarchy. I emphasize that patriarchal ideology brainwashes men to believe that their domination of women is beneficial when it is not. Another quote from her essay, Men, Comrades in Struggle. Often, feminist activists affirm this logic when we should be constantly naming these acts as expressions of perverted power relations, general lack of control of one's actions, emotional powerlessness, extreme irrationality, and in many cases, outright insanity. Passive male absorption of sexist ideology enables men to falsely interpret this disturbed behavior positively. As long as men are brainwashed to equate violent domination and abuse of women with privilege, they will have no understanding of the damage done to themselves or to others, and no motivation to change. Oh, that's the end of that quote from her essay. And before I go on to the rest of the book, I'm called upon by Spirit to say this, how, just to clarify, what does she mean by that? She means that, okay, I've been wanting to say this whole time. The the domestic violence statistics about people who are married to or dating police officers is crazy, but it makes sense because in the minds of a patriarchal man, it is normal and right and just for you to throw a tantrum and behave violently. Just look at our former president, like that behavior is considered normal and manly and right. And it's actually, as soon as you look to psychologists, to other human beings, to everybody around is thinking to themselves, wow, you're acting crazy. But it's considered normal. Okay, I feel like maybe I shouldn't have done that aside, but we're live. I can't take it back. I can't take it back. I'll just repeat what she said. As long as men are brainwashed to equate violent domination and abuse of women with privilege, they will have no understanding of the damage done to themselves or to others and no motivation to change. Okay, this was the point that I wanted to make, is that only hurt people, right? And every time that I have injured someone psychologically or physically from anger, I felt terrible afterwards. But imagine if you hurt someone, you feel terrible about it, but then everybody around you is like, don't feel bad, deny those feelings. What you did was the right thing to do. If that happens to you your whole life, you begin to conform to that set of behaviors, and that becomes your new normal. And that's why we have serial abusers. Truly, they're hurting, but they don't know how to address their pain, whether it's the pain that precedes the violence or the pain that comes after having done violence, whether it's psychological, verbal, or physical abuse. Um, I think a natural human response is to feel a little guilty about that. And if you haven't seen any of my other videos, there is a Instagram account and a movement starting in New Zealand called She Is Not Your Rehab. She is not your rehab. Okay? It's about men getting together to rehabilitate their own childhood trauma, because taking it out on your partners or your children isn't going to make you feel better. It's probably going to make you feel worse. And then you're going to drink more, and then you're going to be more violent, and then you're going to feel worse, and then you're going to take it out on your anybody who's less powerful than you. And you don't even have to be in a domestic situation. Like, if you're the CEO of a company, right? And you're lonely and you're sad, and as a man, you're not allowed to address your loneliness and your sadness, so you just take it out on your employees, and everybody like rewards you for that behavior, or at least doesn't say anything about it, and so the cycle continues and nobody wins. I just want us all to win. That's my soapbox. Let's get back onto Belle's soapbox. She has a much better articulated argument than I do. So here we are. Patriarchy demands of men that they become and remain emotional cripples. I'm going to say it again. Patriarchy demands of men that they become and remain emotional cripples. Since it is a system that denies men full access to their freedom of will, it is difficult for any man of any class to rebel against patriarchy, to be disloyal to the patriarchal parent, be that parent female or male. The man who has been my primary bond for more than 12 years was traumatized by the patriarchal dynamics in his family of origin. When I met him, he was in his 20s. While his formative years had been spent in the company of a violent alcoholic dad, his circumstances changed when he was 12 and began to live alone with his mother. In the early years of our relationship, he talked openly about his hostility and rage towards his abusing dad. He was not interested in forgiving him or understanding the circumstances that had shaped and influenced his dad's life, either in his childhood or in his working life as a military man. In the early years of our relationship, he was extremely critical of male domination of women and children. Although he did not use the word patriarchy, he understood its meaning and he opposed it. His gentle, quiet manner often led folks to ignore him, counting him among the weak and the powerless. By the age of 30, he began to assume a more macho persona, embracing the dominator model that he had once critiqued. Donning the mantle of patriarch, he gained greater respect and visibility. More women were drawn to him. He was noticed more in public spheres. His criticism of male domination ceased. And indeed, he began to mouth patriarchal rhetoric, saying the kind of sexist stuff that would have appalled him in the past. These changes in his thinking and behavior were triggered by his desire to be accepted and affirmed in a patriarchal workplace, and rationalized by his desire to get ahead. His story is not unusual. Boys brutalized and victimized by patriarchy more often than not become patriarchal, embodying the abusive patriarchal masculinity that they once clearly recognized as evil. Few men, brutally abused as boys in the name of patriarchal maleness, courageously resist the brainwashing and remain true to themselves. Most males conform to patriarchy in one way or another. Indeed, radical feminist critique of patriarchy has practically been silenced in our culture. It has become a subcultural discourse available only to well-educated elites. Even in those circles, using the word patriarchy is regarded as passé. This was written in 2004. I'm pretty sure all the cool kids are talking about patriarchy these days. Back to Belle. Often in my lectures, when I use the phrase, can do a hair flip or like take a drink every time she says imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. I still like to add ableist in there, but I'll get it next time. Often in my lectures, when I use the phrase imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, ableist patriarchy to describe our nation's political system, audiences laugh. No one has ever explained why accurately naming the system is funny. I have a guess. My guess, Belle, is that people laugh because it makes them nervous, because it like tickles something in our hearts that's like, oh, that's what it's called. Ha ha ha. It's nervous. It's definitely nervous laughter. Yeah, the part of our ego that is identified with the imperialist, white supremacist, ableist, capitalist patriarchy starts to quiver. And so it gets nervous. That part of our ego, the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, ableist part of our ego, is what's causing the laughter, and it's nervous laughter. Should be afraid. Be very afraid. Ashley Gemini has just explained why accurately naming this system is funny. I was paraphrasing. Anyway, back to the book. The laughter is itself a weapon of patriarchal terrorism. What did I say? The ego is laughing Like the part that identifies with the system is the part that's laughing. It is a weapon of patriarchal terrorism. It functions as a disclaimer, discounting the significance of what is being named. It suggests that the words themselves are problematic and not the system they describe. I interpret this laughter as the audience's way of showing discomfort with being asked to ally themselves with an anti-patriarchal, disobedient critique. This laughter reminds me that if I dare to challenge patriarchy openly, I risk not being taken seriously. Look, by being on the internet in my underwear, I risk not being taken seriously, so bring it on. Citizens in this nation fear challenging patriarchy even as they lack overt awareness that they are fearful. So deeply embedded in our culture, so deeply embedded in our collective unconscious are the rules of patriarchy. I often tell audiences that if we were to go door to door asking if we should end male violence against women, most people would give their unequivocal support. I love that she says not all people, most people. Most people would give their unequivocal support. Then, if you told them we can only stop male violence against women by ending male domination, by eradicating patriarchy, they would begin to hesitate to change their position. Despite the many gains of contemporary feminist movement, greater equality for women in the workforce, more tolerance for the relinquishing of rigid gender roles, patriarchy as a system remains intact, and many people continue to believe that it is needed if humans are to survive as a species. This belief seems ironic, given that patriarchal methods of organizing nations, especially the insistence on violence as a means of social control, has actually led to the slaughter of millions of people on the planet. We're going to say that again. The belief that patriarchy as a system is needed if humans are to survive as a species seems ironic, given that patriarchal methods of organizing nations, especially the insistence on violence as a means of social control, from war to policing, everything in between, has actually led to the slaughter of millions of people on the planet and the environment. She didn't say that, but it was 2004. Literally in 2004, we still knew that the environment was, I'll just say, suffering, to put it lightly. And maybe she does mention the environmental impact, but she's a socialist. We're here to talk about people. Socialist? That's not what I meant to say. She's a social scientist. That's what I meant to say. I don't know her political beliefs like that. Don't at me. Back to Bell. Until we can collectively acknowledge the damage patriarchy causes and the suffering it creates, we cannot address male pain. We cannot demand for men the right to be whole, to be givers and sustainers of life. Obviously, some patriarchal men are reliable and even benevolent caretakers and providers, but they are still imprisoned by a system that undermines their mental health. Patriarchy promotes insanity. Period. Wrap it up, people. We're done here. Patriarchy promotes insanity. Her and her one-liners. Whenever you hear something that's like a real mic drop, it's probably the beginning of a new paragraph. And it derails me. Not every time, but often. It's been an hour. I've way more than halfway through. Don't worry, everybody. We've got like 5 more pages. We can do this. It's not my fault she be dropping bars. Look. Patriarchy promotes insanity. Facts are facts. Patriarchy promotes insanity. It is the root of the psychological ills troubling men in our nation. Nevertheless, there is no mass concern for the plight of men. Okay, last one. I keep saying this is the last time, and then I'm gonna shut up, and then I'm just gonna read the book. But I can't. I have a very large, thick, girthy background in psychology, and let me tell you, the fact that there is no mass concern for the plight of men is a problem. When I was applying for doctoral programs, I looked everywhere for like men's studies because I'm like, it's not the same guy out here raping 1 in 5 women. It's definitely more than one guy, right? It's probably not 1 in 5 guys, but it's a problem. It's a fucking problem. Look, and 1 in 10 children before the age of 18, not saying that all rapists are men, but overwhelmingly the majority is. And I'm like, who hurt you? What's going on with y'all? Can we talk about it? And the answer is we can't. We don't even have the language to talk about it because maleness and patriarchal maleness is considered normal. So there's like, no, everybody's like, no, there's no problem. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. And we're just now starting to get to talking about it. Girl, Susan Faludi is gonna help. What was I trying to say? I think I said it. I said it. It's a problem. There's no mass concern for the plight of men. I'm concerned. I'm out here in my underwear on the internet because I'm concerned. I'm concerned for y'all. And also, if you haven't seen my introduction video, my theory is that men aren't going to listen to you unless you take your clothes off. So I took my clothes off. Look, I'm just out here trying to save the world, just one drop at a time. So one décolletage at a time. We're getting there. Back to the book. I get excited about challenging patriarchy because I really do think that it's the fastest, easiest, most direct way to saving the whole planet. So if we could just solve this patriarchy problem, and we need men to do it. So guys, listen up. Patriarchy promotes insanity. It is at the root of the psychological ills troubling men in our nation. Nevertheless, there is no mass concern for the plight of men. In Stift, The Betrayal of the American Man, Susan Faludi includes very little discussion of patriarchy. Okay, I thought she was going to help, but maybe not. This is a long block quote. Susan Faludi states, ask feminists to diagnose men's problems and you will often get a very clear explanation. Oh no. Oh no, but we need to talk about this. I'll start over. Ask feminists to diagnose men's problems and you will often get a very clear explanation. Men are in crisis because women are properly challenging male dominance. Women are asking men to share public reins and men can't bear it. Ask anti-feminists and you will get a diagnosis that is, in one respect, similar. Men are troubled, many conservative pundits say, because women have gone far beyond their demands for equal treatment and are now trying to take control. Ugh. You know, there are some things you can't say with a straight face, and there are some things you can't say without giving yourself a whole neck massage. Still the same quote. This is still Susan Faludi, not bell hooks. Still Susan Faludi and not bell hooks. I'm going to try to say it with straight face. The underlying message, men cannot be men, only eunuchs if they are not in control. Both the feminist and anti-feminist views are rooted in a peculiarly modern American perception that to be a man means to be at the controls and at all times to feel yourself in control. End quote. Personal note, how exhausting. How exhausting indeed. P.S. That's why dominatrixes are a thing, because it is exhausting to be in control all the time. It is exhausting to feel the need to feel yourself in control all the time. And what's liberating about being a submissive is letting somebody else be in control, whatever your gender is. Power play, get into it. or not, your body, your choice, no kink shame. Back to Belle. Faludi never interrogates the notion of control. She never considers that the notion that men were somehow in control, in power, and satisfied with their lives before contemporary feminist movement is false. To put it another way, maybe that position of always being in control kind of sucks. Maybe everyone would feel better if there was more balance and power. Back to Belle. Patriarchy as a system has denied males access to full emotional well-being, which is not the same as feeling rewarded, successful, or powerful because of one's capacity to assert control over others. You can tell it's the beginning of a new paragraph because that bar is right there. Okay. I'm saying it again. Patriarchy as a system has denied males access to full emotional well-being. What it has provided men is, but it's not the same, feeling rewarded, successful, or powerful because of one's capacity to assert control over others. Just saying. To truly address male pain and male crisis, we must, as a nation, be willing to expose the harsh reality that patriarchy has damaged men in the past and continues to damage them in the present. If patriarchy were truly rewarding to men, the violence and addiction in family life that is so all-pervasive would not exist. I'm going to say that again too. If patriarchy were truly rewarding to men, the violence and addiction in family life that is so all-pervasive would not exist. This violence was not created by feminism. If patriarchy were rewarding, the overwhelming dissatisfaction most men feel in their work lives, a dissatisfaction extensively documented in the work of Studs Terkel and echoed in Faludi's treatise, would not exist. In many ways, Stift, the book by Susan Faludi, that we just quoted earlier, Stift was yet another betrayal of American men because Faludi spends so much time trying not to challenge patriarchy that she fails to highlight the necessity of ending patriarchy if we are to liberate men. Rather, she writes, instead of wondering why men resist women's struggle for a freer and healthier life, I began to wonder why men refrain from engaging in their own struggle. Why, despite a crescendo of random tantrums, they have offered no methodical, reasoned response to their predicament. Given the untenable and insulting nature of the demands placed on men to prove themselves in our culture, why don't men revolt? Why haven't men responded to the series of betrayals in their own lives, to the failures of their fathers to make good on their promises, with something co-equal to feminism? End quote. I don't know, Belle, that seems like a good question. So Bell Hooks responds, note that Faludi does not dare risk either the ire of feminist females, by suggesting that men can find salvation in feminist movement. You're right, okay. Faludi does not dare risk the ire of feminist females by suggesting that men can find salvation in feminist movement, or a rejection by potential male readers who are solidly anti-feminist by suggesting that they have something to gain from engaging in feminism. So Bell Hooks is mad that Faludi was like, why don't y'all reinvent the wheel? Why don't you reinvent what masculinity means or something? And Bell Hooks is like, they could just be feminists. They could be, as she says, comrades in struggle. Feminism has something to offer everybody. Good for the whole family. Back to Bell. So far in our nation, visionary feminist movement is the only struggle for justice that emphasizes the need to end patriarchy. No mass body of women has challenged patriarchy, and neither has any group of men come together to lead the struggle. The crisis facing men is not the crisis of masculinity. It is the crisis of patriarchal masculinity. Until we make this distinction clear, men will continue to fear that any critique of patriarchy represents a threat. Distinguishing political patriarchy, which he sees as largely committed to ending sexism, therapist Terence Real makes clear that the patriarchy damaging us all is embedded in our psyches. Block quote from Terence Real. Psychological patriarchy is the dynamic between those qualities deemed masculine and feminine, in which half of our human traits are exalted while the other half is devalued. Both men and women participate in this tortured value system. Psychological patriarchy is a dance of contempt, a perverse form of connection that replaces true intimacy with complex, covert layers of dominance and submission, collusion and manipulation. More on that in the chapter on sex. It is the unacknowledged paradigm of relationships that has suffused Western civilization generation after generation, deforming both sexes and destroying the passionate bond between them. End quote. By highlighting psychological patriarchy, we see that everyone is implicated and we are freed from the misperception that men are the enemy. It is nice. It was really nice when I read this book the first time and I realized men aren't the problem. Patriarchy's the problem. Men aren't monsters. Masculinity doesn't even have to be toxic. Patriarchy's the problem. Patriarchy is the reason why most masculinity as we see it today is toxic. Patriarchy is the reason why most men can't be trusted and can't figure out how to love. It's not because they're born smelly, gross, violent people. Men are people. And people are not robots to be programmed, like you input patriarchy and you get out violence, but we are very highly influenced. It's like we're more like plants. We're literally animals, but we'll use the plant analogy where seeds are going to be seeds, right? But depending on what soil and light and water conditions you put into that seed, it's going to influence the kind of plant that it's going to be, right? And if you're born with a penis, the kind of soil and light and water that you get is not great, passionate, sane human being. Just a theory, believe what you want to believe. Let's talk about it in the comments. Wow, I'm only one paragraph away and I almost don't want to stop. Okay. I'm going to read that again. By highlighting psychological patriarchy, we see that everyone is implicated and we are freed from the misperception that men are the enemy. To end patriarchy, we must challenge both its psychological and its concrete manifestations in daily life. There are folks who are able to critique patriarchy but unable to act in an anti-patriarchal manner. To end male pain, to respond effectively to male crisis, we have to name the problem. We have to both acknowledge that the problem is patriarchy, not men. I mean, men become the problem, but the problem is patriarchy. Back to the book, sorry. We have to both acknowledge that the problem is patriarchy and work to end patriarchy. Terence Real offers this valuable insight, quote, "The reclamation of wholeness is a process even more fraught for men than it has been for women, more difficult and more profoundly threatening to the culture at large," end quote. If men are to reclaim the essential goodness of male being, if they are to regain the space of open-heartedness and emotional expressiveness that is the foundation of well-being, we must envision alternatives to patriarchal masculinity. We must all change. Aww. Yeah, the last sentences are good too. I wish that this chapter was twice as long, but this video is already an hour and a half. I wanted to comment something that Terrence said. Oh, the reclamation of wholeness is a process even more fraught for men than it has been for women, because women are allowed in a patriarchal society to talk about our feelings and men aren't. What else do I have to say about patriarchy? Oh God. In one of the videos that is on my dead hard drive, I was in a mood when I filmed, and I was talking about it because authenticity is the new perfection. Keeping secrets and denying our feelings are things that help to uplift and uphold the white supremacist, capitalist, ableist, imperialist patriarchy, the system under which everyone suffers, including the environment, people. That's ugh. Systems of domination are upheld by keeping secrets and lying and not being authentic. So I was controversial yet brave in talking about what my problems were. All of that data is deleted. That mood has come and gone long ago, but I realized that the reason I was in a mood was because of an interpersonal problem, and that interpersonal problem, maybe like one or two, if you dig just like a couple of layers underneath the surface problem, you find patriarchy. So let's play a game. Think of any interpersonal problem you have, maybe even an institutional problem. Whatever issue you have, let's play 6 degrees of separation from patriarchy. And if you can't do it yourself, I promise I'm here to help. The system is so pervasive that everybody thinks of it as normal, but once we start to understand the system, the title of chapter 2 is Understanding Patriarchy. Once we begin to understand patriarchy, we immediately start to see how harmful it is in every aspect of every interaction we have as human beings. So let's play a game. Comment below any problems you're having, and especially the ones that you think, like, that has nothing to do with patriarchy. Try me. I love learning new things. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I love to be right. So if I'm wrong about this, let me know. But I really think I'm right that kind of all problems are rooted in imperialist, capitalist, ableist, white supremacist patriarchy. Disagree? Let's talk about it. Thank you so much for watching. I still have 1 viewer. I don't know if YouTube is counting myself, because I am watching myself, but I don't know. I've got 18 subscribers. Maybe it's one of y'all. Please subscribe, share, like, comment. I won't be able to go live from my phone until I get 1,000 subscribers, which is something that I'd like to be able to do just in case we have to return this computer and my new computer doesn't come in the mail soon enough, because I'm excited for this book. I am probably going to take a little lunch break and then read chapter 3. And it's called Being a Boy, I think. Yes, chapter 3, Being a Boy. Teaser, boys are not seen as lovable in patriarchal culture. Hot takes. So let me know if you're excited for the next chapter. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get back on the internet. Technical difficulties, right? But spring has sprung. I am feeling super motivated and really excited to continue sharing this book with y'all. And I hope you're having a great everything all the time. One day I'll come up with a catchphrase. Until then, take care.